Welcome back to another week of Experience Andy Wines Live, where we jump into all the things and words we say to ourselves and others that really shape and mold our perspective of the world and ultimately shape our reality. So we always start with a moment of gratitude. This week, I want to thank someone very special to me. My assistant, Emmy Thiel, told me earlier today that she is speaking and taking another opportunity outside of the company that she had worked for, that we had contracted with for the last 3 years. And I was angry and I was frustrated. This morning when she told me, I told her I don't approve of this because she has really been the backbone to me the last 3 years. And as I was sitting here thinking, okay, what am I grateful for? And thinking, what did I do last week? And who have I interacted with? And I thought, okay, this is an opportunity to test myself to say, okay, let's look at this as a positive thing, right? I'm grateful for the last 3 years that we've got the opportunity to work together. I'm grateful for the relationship on a personal end and personal side that we've developed and built. I'm grateful that she learned how I operate and she found a way to really maximize both of our time by and minimizing our effort so that we were able to accomplish some great things the last 3 years. So even in this moment, one of my mentors always told me there's no such thing as good news or bad news, only new information, what you do with it. And yeah, my initial feelings were of doubt and fear and frustration and loss. Absolutely, I felt that way. And now the goal is, how can I articulate those feelings in a manner that is positive, in a manner that is showing gratefulness, and also being optimistic that she is great at what she does, and I have faith in the company that she worked for, that they'll find me someone close enough to her where we can continue doing amazing things within our business. And even on my personal side, she takes care of a lot of stuff from booking trips and things like that, which I greatly appreciate. So moment of gratitude goes towards Emmy. And my challenge to you right off the bat here is find someone who you are grateful for that is quasi irreplaceable in your life. And if you don't say it enough to them, this is a great opportunity to tell them how irreplaceable they are to you. And I told Emmy that often, and I've spoke very highly of Emmy and talked about her at length in many rooms, and many people know that, and it's always felt good. And now it feels good to share that with everybody when I'm going to be going through a loss personally and professionally with her no longer in my life. All right. Second thing we do is the business end of things. I do keynote speaking. That's one of the reasons why I come on this show every week. I love to give away the answers for free in this environment, wherein you can pick up tips and tricks along the way. Really, the ultimate goal, though, is I can get inside of your businesses, your organizations, conferences, and do workshops and keynote speakings, everything from being a panelist to doing 45-minute or 60-minute keynotes up to 4-hour workshops. And I've been very grateful that I've been picked up by a few conferences this year yet, and I'm looking to book into next year. So if there's conferences, what I'm really leaning into is the language of leadership. How do we, as leaders, empower ourselves and those around us, and those around us meaning the fellow workers, fellow teammates in that regard, and also our partners, our organization, right? Whether that's customers or vendors. How do we take these lessons learned in the language of leadership to be most effective and empower those around us? So that's the main workshop that's gotten the most traction with companies out there. They're looking to build their organizations, enhance that experience as an employee. Bringing third-party speakers in and teaching and training and coaching and mentoring is a great way to do that. So hit me up, andywines.com. You can find all my info there, including my speaker reel, speaker sheet, and I would love to have a conversation with you. All right, let's get into the meat and potatoes of the thing. So today we're going to talk about your feelings, right? There's some people that say, fuck your feelings, or I want to know the facts, not your feelings. And that's not the case here. This is, let's lean into your feelings, right? We're not going to be talking about reactions. We're not going to talk about your emotions, right? I want to articulate and teach a lesson, teach a very simple strategy so that you can articulate your feelings with words. What often happens, whether this is with children, this is with your significant other, this is with customers or people you work with, right? They tell you all this information and you're like, hold on, how do I pick out the pieces of information within this big dissertation, this big ball of fuck, right? How do I pull out the information that's most critical? How do I find the information that's controllable? How do I find the information that we can have a course of action on? And so this is the challenge. The challenge is, first, with you, when you feel a certain way, right? You got the feelings, right? How do I express my feelings? And then how do I get others to express theirs? So the first lesson I'm going to use is with regard to the other person, because it's always simpler, right? We think it's really simple to get other people to express their feelings, while sometimes it's very complicated to express our own. And so one of the things that we use, especially in customer service, when we're talking to our clients, whether they had a positive or negative experience, and I have this same conversation with my daughter, and I had it when I had significant others in the past. What is your ideal outcome? Start there. When somebody is spiraling, they are catastrophizing. They're all over the place. They don't know where to start, right? Once they've unloaded all of it, and there's that natural pause in the situation, ask the simple question: what is your ideal outcome? And sometimes people just say, I want to be heard. I want to vent. I don't know what to do. And now we have a starting point. And now we can say, okay, let's dissect what you're going through, and what did you want that you didn't get? What did you anticipate that didn't happen? What were your expectations of yourself, of the other person, that were unmet, and now you are where you're at all over the place, right? This is that moment, right, when there's a true need, right? This is the put the fire out, right? What is your ideal outcome? We often get this in business. A customer will call and say, oh, this happened, and then this happened, and this happened, right? We want to acknowledge that they felt wrong. I never apologize. I'm going to acknowledge where you're at, how you're feeling, your frustration. I will acknowledge it. I'm not going to argue with you, right? You feel the way you feel, right? And after we get that initial blow, the first thing we always ask is, what is your ideal outcome? We do junk removal. We move things in and out of people's houses every day, mostly out, I should say. Mostly out of there, or I need to say, not should is the shit word, right? I need to say what we do, which is we take things out of people's houses. Okay. Sometimes we scratch doors and floors, and that's not ideal. And the customer will come and they'll say, oh my God, you scratched my floor. And it's, yeah, okay. What's your ideal outcome? Oh, these were brand new floors. We got them refinished. What's your ideal outcome? We keep going back to that. We are going to be receptive and listen to what they have to say. And yet we're going to keep asking, what is your ideal outcome? And now we'll church it up, right? What can we do for you? I understand where you're coming from. What does right look like? So I go back to what is your ideal outcome, and you can church it up with whatever fuzzy words you want to. Ultimately, what's the ideal outcome? Sometimes someone says, oh, it's not a big deal. I wanted to vent. Or they'll say, hey, I don't want you to charge me for the job at all. Or they'll say, take off $100. Or they'll say, can you get the doors fixed? We had a situation recently. We scuffed up a door, and they just fixed the door. Fine. We called our person that goes and fix it, and all she did is take some walnut and some oil, and she was able to buff out the surface scratch on the door by using a walnut and some oil, and everybody was happy, right? We were happy that we resolved the issue. The customer was happy that you couldn't tell what happened to the door, and the person that does our repair work was happy because she got paid to do a job that was relatively simple, right? Because us scratching the door already occurred. And once we start that conversation with what is your ideal outcome, we can now be very focused. Jordan Peterson speaks at length about this. When people are angry or they're frustrated, what ends up happening is they're reacting, right? Very important to use that word reacting, fight, flight, or freeze, faster than your brain can process new information. This happened to me last week. I was very frustrated with the situation my mom called me about. She was upset. She called me, and then I started reacting, right? I started operating out of a place of scarcity, a place of frustration and hatred. And I got worked up, and I know this about myself. I start to stutter when I'm really frustrated and real angry because I'm searching for the words. I'm wanting to say the words, and yet the words aren't coming out because my brain hasn't picked up on this new information, because I know there's new information coming in, and yet I want to react to that egregious. I want to react to my frustrations or my anger. And so it happens right when I sit here every week and talk and speak from my pulpit, if you will. I'm speaking from a place of this is something I struggle with, and I want to talk to the rest of the world about it, right? And in this situation, when I had with my mom, I wasn't frustrated with her. We were both frustrated about the same thing, the same person. Once I sat back and said, okay, what is my ideal outcome? I said, okay, I don't need to frustrate. I don't need to vent and talk to my mom about how frustrated I am. I need to address that person that upset my mom. That's what my ideal outcome is, to make sure, is to ensure that the way my mom feels is heard by the other person. That's my ideal outcome is to stand up for my mom, right? So that was my ideal outcome. And as soon as I realized that, I'm like, okay, shoot a text, make the phone call, got on the phone with that individual, and the individual had no idea how upset my mom was. And then once I had that conversation, then the next ideal outcome was that person called and had a conversation with my mom, so they could get on the same page, right? And so in that moment that my mom was frustrated, and then she called me, and I added a level of frustration to it, all we got is more confusion, more frustration, more anger, instead of taking that time to say, okay, what is my ideal outcome? I'm feeling a certain way. What is my ideal outcome? And now it's going to come to our second part, right? So that's the simpler part. Look at another person's situation. Oh, it's fucked. What do we need to do? Unfuck it. Got it. Now we're going to do some work on ourselves, right? In that first bucket I love to live in, which is self-reflection. So we can be self-aware and then also ultimately self-regulation. So we're going to start with self-reflection. Often, myself included, when I'm frustrated, I'm not really sure what I'm frustrated about. I know I'm frustrated. I'm often treating the symptoms, not the problem. And through self-reflection and conversations with the person who potentially is the potential source of my frustration, or talking to other people, my counselor, my close circle of people, my business coach, often I can come and figure out, hold on, why am I feeling a certain way? Right? And what is the action the other person is doing that causes me to feel that way? I'm being very particular about my words here, right? I'm not saying they're making me. I'm not saying that they make me feel this way or their actions force me. No, I feel a certain way, right? And so this is the simplest sentence I can give to you to use, right? And once you solve this equation and present this to the other person, then you can now start with the facts, right? I feel this way when you XYZ. So last week, for example, I felt disrespected when a former employee of mine associated himself with someone that wronged me in the past. So I felt disrespected. That's how I felt. And then what does that look like? I don't want to be around that or associate with that person. I don't want that person to associate with my family. I don't want to invest in that person's future as I did in their past. And so now, because I was able to articulate my feelings in such a way, right? And I'm not saying you make me feel or you did this to me. No, there's no argument there when I say I feel disrespected when you XYZ. And now they can say, well, that was not my intention. Great. I still feel this way. I feel this way when that thing happened. And it applies to all aspects of life. And also on the flip side, it's also a great way to express gratitude, right? I feel fulfilled, right? When my assistant, Emmy, for example, hears me and solves problems for me before they become problems, right? I feel empowered when she does my itinerary for trips because it's something that frustrates me from time to time. And so now once you start using that language, I feel this way when you, right, and relate it to as specific as a target, right? Think about your relationships with others, right? You can say, hey, I feel loved when you do the dishes because acts of service means a lot to me. I feel heard when you put your phone down and we have a one-on-one conversation and we're intentional about our time. When you start using that language, and yes, it is super uncomfortable. It sounds janky, or we're basically doing a fucking Mad Libs about our feelings. Got it. Good. Unacknowledged. And yet it is extremely powerful, especially in those personal relationships with people. When you can articulate, I feel this way when you're making your priorities or your feelings a priority. And you're letting the other person know that small target that they can hit, right? I feel frustrated when you put, I thought about that. I'm thinking about this right in real time right now. I remember there was a guy I worked with years ago. He was a carpenter and his wife would put pepper on the mac and cheese. And he came in one day bitching about his wife, as one does. And he goes, 15 years of marriage, she still puts pepper in the fucking mac and cheese, and there's no fucking fixing this. He's pulling out his lunch, leftovers from the night before, and reliving 15 years of frustration with his wife. He could have easily said, hey, I feel frustrated when you put pepper on the mac and cheese because I don't like pepper, and left it at that. From there, she can be like, fuck you, you're an asshole. I'm going to put pepper on it because I don't care about you. Or maybe she forgot that he doesn't like pepper or doesn't even know it. And yet this guy, this is 15 years ago when I remember this conversation like it was yesterday, how angry he was one day about pepper on the mac and cheese. And yet how small of a target would that have been a hit for his wife? Oh, so you'll be happier without pepper on your mac and cheese? One less thing. Or, oh, wow, you're going to put pepper on my mac and cheese regardless how I tell you I feel? Well, what else do you do around here because you don't care about me and you don't love me and you don't respect me. And maybe this isn't the marriage I thought it was going to be, right? And now we're going to be at odds and have some animosity. I can tell you, when you lower your walls and you tell people how you feel, hey, this is how I feel right here, right? I'm gonna let you in to my space. More often than not, the other person is also going to then be more vulnerable. They're going to come in calm. And now you've also created a space for them to say, you know what? I feel this way when you do that. And now what we're doing is we're having true, meaningful communication versus two people yelling near each other, two people talking and not communicating, two people that are saying a lot and not listening to each other. And so now let's combine these two methodologies, right? When someone's frustrated and all over the place, they're spiraling, they're spinning, right? And you ask, what is your ideal outcome? They can tell you their ideal outcome. Okay, now we've solved the immediate threat. We've fixed the immediate problem. And now you can work them through this. Okay, how do we prevent this in the future? How do we stop you from getting this place in the future? And when you use the language, I feel this way when you that, they can take that back to their place of frustration, right? Maybe it's at work. Maybe there's someone at work that slights them and doesn't even know it. Hey, I feel frustrated when you take my parking spot. Right? Whatever people get frustrated about. Okay, cool. That person can take your parking spot. You know what? If they continue to take your parking spot and you continue to get frustrated, who's the insane one then? I know me, for example, I get frustrated every time I go to the Keurig and it's low on water, right? Because the person in front of me only filled it up enough to make their cup of coffee. That frustrated me. I let that eat me up for 6 months. And then I remembered I'm the owner of the fucking company and I'm an adult and I bought a new Keurig that has a hard water line plumb to it. And now I haven't gotten frustrated in 6 months because my coffee is always readily available because I fixed the problem with a process. And I allowed that to irritate me and I confronted the people and it did not change behavior. So you know what? I owned the problem. I became the victor of my story versus the victim of my circumstance over water in the Keurig machine. That was 6 months ago and I still think about that every time I go to the Keurig because for years I allowed that negativity and frustration to come into me because I was able to articulate, hey, I feel disrespected as the owner of the business when you do not fill up the water in the Keurig. And it was one or two people in particular that I watched do this over and over. Those people are no longer with us, and I changed the process. It's shitty people can fuck up great processes every day. When you have great processes and great people, you don't get shitty about the fucking water in the Keurig machine, right? There's my own personal story, right? As vulnerable as a cup of coffee is. The amount of coffee I drink is a relatively vulnerable statement. So here's the deal. When you get out in this world, right, you're going to face frustration. You're going to have emotion. You're going to run into people that are big balls of fucks and do not know where to start. You've been now empowered with these 2 lessons. What is your ideal outcome? Start there and work with the person to get to what is the ideal outcome when we are in the kill zone. What gets us out of the kill zone? Second thing, when you're reflecting or after you've got out of the kill zone with the other person, right? What conversations do you need to have with yourself through meditation and reflection? What conversations do you need to have with that person that the subject of your frustration? Or what conversations do you need to have with other people to get to a place where you can articulate and go back to that person in particular and say, I feel such a way when you do that. I would encourage you to practice that on a positive note first, right? Tell my daughter, I feel loved when you come up and give me a hug unprompted. That feels pretty good to say it. It feels pretty good for her to hear that. And now we're talking about reinforcing positive behavior. So start by using I feel when you in a positive manner. Reflect back and find the I feel when you so you can change the perspective of other people by giving them your perspective. And always have in your back pocket, what is your ideal outcome when you see somebody in the kill zone and you want to support them get out of it. As always, we're going to do the same thing that I live by and breathe by, and I'm writing my newest book by. We're going to do the fucking thing. We're going to tell the fucking world. And when it all comes down to it, we're going to show the fuck up every week. I'll see you next week.